James Carter had always been there for his son, Tommy, who was born with a condition that left him paralyzed. Despite James's love and care, Tommy struggled, and their home felt quieter than it should. Then one day, James found a strange dog named Spirit. From the moment Tommy met him, something magical happened. Spirit seemed to understand Tommy in ways no one else did. But Spirit's odd behavior began to grow with the passage of time, and he did something that left everyone in shock. James Carter was a hardworking single father living in a modest house on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. For as long as he could remember, his life had been shaped by one singular focus: his son, Tommy. From the moment Tommy was born, James's world shifted entirely. He was no longer just a man trying to make a living. He was a father dedicated to raising his son, who had been born with a serious congenital condition that affected his spinal cord. Tommy, despite his physical challenges, was an incredibly cheerful and optimistic child, which made the bond between father and son even stronger. James had married young, and his life with his wife had been full of hope for the future. However, tragedy struck when Tommy was born. His wife, Susan, tragically passed away during childbirth, leaving James to raise Tommy on his own. It wasn't an easy task, especially with the added complexities of Tommy's condition. James found himself playing the roles of both mother and father, doing everything he could to provide for and protect his son. His days were a constant whirlwind of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and late nights filled with worry about Tommy's well-being. Despite the struggles, James never once regretted the decision to become a father. Tommy was his entire world. However, there were times when James couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The physical challenges that Tommy faced were visible every day. He was unable to walk and relied on a wheelchair, and although his medical team did their best to provide solutions and therapies, James sometimes felt that his son's life was defined by his disability. There were moments when Tommy, too, seemed aware of this, when he would look longingly at other children running or playing, and James would see a sadness flicker in his son's eyes. Yet Tommy never complained. He had an unshakable spirit and a heart that remained as bright as the Arizona sun. His laughter echoed through their small home, and his curiosity was endless. Tommy loved to talk about everything, from the books his father read to him to the animals he dreamt of meeting one day. He had a special fondness for dogs. Every time they passed a dog on their walks or saw one on TV, Tommy's face would light up with excitement, and he would ask, "Dad, when can we get a dog?" For James, this question was difficult to answer. He had always known that caring for a pet was a significant responsibility, but he also understood how much joy a dog could bring, especially to a child like Tommy, who was often confined to their home. The idea of getting a dog for Tommy started to seem like a reasonable solution to the loneliness that sometimes seeped into their lives. A dog could offer companionship, unconditional love, and perhaps a sense of freedom for Tommy, who spent much of his time inside. James began to look into getting a dog, but the task wasn't as simple as he initially thought. He didn't just want any dog, he wanted one that would be a good fit for Tommy, one that could offer more than just companionship. He wanted a dog that could understand Tommy's unique needs and perhaps provide some emotional support, a companion who could be a true friend. As James scoured online forums and visited local shelters, he found himself feeling disheartened. Most of the dogs he met were friendly but not quite the right fit. He needed something more, something extraordinary. As time passed, he began to wonder if such a dog even existed. It was during one of these low moments of doubt that he stumbled across a mysterious post online, describing a rare breed of dog with special qualities. The post, which seemed almost too good to be true, described a breed known for their intelligence, loyalty, and unusual ability to bond deeply with people in need. These dogs were said to possess healing abilities, especially for children who faced emotional or physical challenges. The more James read, the more intrigued he became. He began to think perhaps this could be the answer he had been searching for. Determined to find this special dog, James decided to follow the lead in the post. He didn't know what to expect, but the hope that it might be the answer for Tommy gave him the courage to take a leap of faith. Little did he know, this decision would set in motion a series of events that would change their lives forever. James could hardly contain his excitement when he finally received the call that the dog was ready to be picked up. After months of waiting, researching and thinking it through from every angle, the day had finally come. He couldn't help but feel a rush of emotions, a mixture of hope, nervousness, and a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel the possibility of something good happening in his life, something that wasn't defined by struggle or sacrifice. The morning they were set to pick up the dog, James woke up early, as he always did. But today there was a different kind of energy in the house. Tommy had been buzzing with excitement for days, his usual reserved nature replaced by an eagerness that made him almost unrecognizable. Tommy had always been a sensitive child, often more comfortable in the quiet, safe spaces of their home. But today he was nearly bouncing with enthusiasm, eagerly waiting for the moment when they would drive to the breeder's house. When they finally arrived, James could see the familiar sight of the breeder's home in the distance, a modest but well-kept property with a few other dogs running around in the yard. As they pulled into the driveway, James's heart skipped a beat. This was it. They were about to meet their new family member. Tommy was already out of the car before James had even fully stopped, his legs moving in excitement as he darted toward the front door. Inside, the breeder greeted them warmly, and it didn't take long before they were led to a cozy corner where the puppies were waiting. James's heart swelled as he saw the little dog, a soft-coated golden brown puppy with large expressive eyes. She was calm, yet there was an undeniable sense of intelligence in the way she looked at them, as if she knew exactly why they were there. Tommy immediately dropped to his knees and reached out, and without hesitation, the puppy walked straight to him, nuzzling her head against Tommy's hand as if they were already old friends. The moment was surreal. James couldn't help but smile, watching the bond that seemed to form instantly between Tommy and the dog. He had hoped for this connection, but seeing it in real time filled him with a sense of relief that he didn't even know he needed. The dog was everything they had hoped for, gentle, affectionate, and incredibly intuitive. It was clear that this was no ordinary puppy. As they spent time with the dog in the breeder's home, James couldn't help but notice the way the dog seemed to gravitate toward Tommy, staying close to him, as if sensing the boy's vulnerability. Tommy, for his part, was delighted. He giggled and giggled, his laughter pure and genuine, something James hadn't heard in a long time. It was as though the dog had unlocked a new side of Tommy, a side of joy and excitement that hadn't fully been there before. The breeder explained that the dog had been trained to help children with special needs, that she had been exposed to various situations designed to build her empathy and understanding. She was already familiar with the signs of anxiety and stress in children, and her presence alone was often enough to soothe them. James listened intently, grateful for this reassurance. The dog wasn't just a companion for Tommy, she was a trained helper who could provide support in moments of distress, a crucial skill for a child like Tommy, who had been through so much already. As they prepared to leave, the breeder handed over a small bag of food, a few toys, and a simple guidebook with tips on how to care for their new companion. James felt a wave of emotion wash over him as he looked at the puppy once more, a feeling that was part gratitude, part disbelief. He had never imagined this moment would actually come to pass, but here it was. Tommy was going to have the friend he'd always dreamed of. The car ride home was filled with a sense of joy and peace that hadn't been there before. Tommy held the puppy in his lap, speaking to her softly, as though they had known each other for years. James watched them in the rearview mirror, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He had done it. He had made a choice that would change their lives for the better. When they finally arrived home, Tommy led the way, showing the dog around their house, introducing her to every corner and every room. It was as though the puppy instantly understood her new role, settling into their home with ease. She followed Tommy everywhere, her soft tail wagging as she explored every nook and cranny. It was clear that the dog was meant to be there. Over the next few days, James and Tommy settled into their new routine with the dog. Her presence was calming, not only for Tommy, but for James as well. He had always been a man who did things out of necessity, never really allowing himself to feel the luxury of joy. But now with this dog in their lives, he began to understand that there was more to life than just surviving. It was about living, about finding moments of happiness in the chaos. The bond between Tommy and the dog deepened quickly. Tommy, who had always been shy and reserved, began to open up more, expressing his feelings in ways he hadn't before. He was more talkative, more engaged, and the once somber atmosphere of the house began to lift. James could see the change in Tommy every day. The dog's presence gave him confidence, a sense of stability and comfort that he hadn't had before. James, too, found himself experiencing a shift. The exhaustion that had weighed on him for so long didn't seem as heavy. Yes, there were still responsibilities, taking care of Tommy, managing their home, working, but now there was a sense of partnership in it. The dog was part of their team, and she was making everything a little bit easier to manage. She was there to provide emotional support when things got tough, and to bring lightness when everything felt overwhelming. Tommy's days were brighter now, filled with the laughter and companionship that he had longed for. The dog, whom they named Bella, had become more than just a pet. She had become a friend, a confidant, and a source of strength for both of them. James had hoped for this change, but even he was surprised by how quickly it happened. As time went on, Bella not only helped Tommy with his emotional needs, but also became a constant reminder for James that life could still hold moments of joy, even in the midst of difficulty. The exhaustion that had once threatened to consume him now felt more manageable, and his days were filled with something new: hope. The first few weeks with Bella felt like a dream to James. Tommy was finally showing a side of himself he hadn't even known was there, and it was all because of the dog. They had always struggled with communication, but Bella seemed to unlock a new way for Tommy to express himself. He no longer kept everything bottled up inside. When he was sad or frustrated, he would sit with Bella and talk to her, as if she understood every word. And in a way, James believed she did. One rainy afternoon, when the sky outside seemed to mirror the heaviness in James's heart, he found himself watching Tommy and Bella play in the living room. Tommy was laughing, a sound that was becoming more familiar now, as Bella chased after a ball he threw with all his might. It was the first time James had seen his son so carefree, so full of joy. The weight of the world seemed to lift, just for a moment. It wasn't that life had magically become easier. The struggles they faced hadn't disappeared overnight. Tommy still had his challenges, and there were days when the road felt long. But with Bella there, the rough patches seemed more bearable. The dog's calming presence had an almost magical effect on Tommy, and James was beginning to notice that it helped him too. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, James sat down on the couch, his mind still swirling with the problems he had left behind at the office. He hadn't realized how tense his shoulders had become until Bella patted over and placed her head in his lap. Surprised, James looked down at her. Her big brown eyes seemed to be saying, "It's okay. Just breathe." He did. He took a deep breath, then another, and for the first time in a while, he felt the tightness in his chest begin to ease. Tommy had been in his room, quiet for a while, so James decided to check on him. When he opened the door, he found his son sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, with Bella curled up beside him. They were both staring out the window at the rain, as if lost in their own world. Tommy didn't seem troubled or sad anymore. His face was calm, his fingers gently stroking Bella's fur. "Hey, buddy," James said softly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful moment. Tommy looked up, his face lighting up with a smile that made James's heart swell. "She's really good, Dad," he said quietly. "Bella always knows when I need her." James nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He hadn't realized just how much this dog had already become a part of their lives. She was more than just a pet. She was a companion, a helper, and a friend. Bella was showing Tommy how to be more open, more confident, and for James, she was helping him remember that it was okay to stop and take a moment for himself. One of the things James admired most about Bella was her patience. It was clear that she had been trained to understand and respond to the needs of children with special needs, but there was something more to her than just training. She seemed to know exactly when Tommy was having a hard time, and she would gently nudge him, as though reminding him that he wasn't alone. And when Tommy felt overwhelmed, Bella would sit quietly by his side, offering comfort without any pressure. James couldn't help but feel grateful every time he saw Bella's calming influence on Tommy. She didn't just help Tommy cope with his emotions, she also taught him empathy. Tommy had started to notice the emotions of others more. He would ask how James was feeling after a hard day, or if his mother seemed upset. He began to understand that everyone had their own struggles, and Bella was helping him navigate the complexities of life with more grace than James had ever thought possible for his son. One particularly difficult evening, when Tommy had come home from school feeling down, Bella's presence was the turning point. Tommy had been quiet all evening, his usual bright energy replaced by silence. James watched him closely, concerned. It wasn't like Tommy to be so withdrawn, especially when Bella was around. James decided to give Tommy some space but kept an eye on him. As the night wore on, Bella seemed to sense Tommy's mood, and after a few minutes of pacing, she walked over to his side and nuzzled her nose into his lap. Tommy looked at her, his eyes softening as he ran his fingers through her fur. Slowly, he began to talk. "I just don't feel good today," Tommy admitted quietly, his voice barely a whisper. James didn't push. He sat beside him, quietly listening. Tommy continued to speak, his words slowly untangling the feelings he had been holding inside. He spoke about school, the kids who didn't understand him, and how sometimes everything felt too overwhelming. Through it all, Bella remained at his side, her calm presence a silent support. By the end of the evening, Tommy was no longer withdrawn. He was still quiet, but there was a sense of peace in his words, something James hadn't heard in him for a while. "You're okay, Tommy," James said softly, wrapping an arm around his son. "You're not alone. We'll figure it out together." And Bella, who had been with them through it all, simply lay down beside them, her eyes closing as if content in the knowledge that her job was done for the day. The more James observed Bella's influence on Tommy, the more he realized how transformative the little dog had been in their lives. She had brought more than just joy and companionship. She had brought a deeper connection between them. James was no longer just a father trying to understand his son. He was becoming a partner in Tommy's emotional journey, guided by a dog who seemed to have an innate sense of what they needed. There were still challenges ahead. Tommy would have tough days, and so would James. But now, with Bella's support, they knew they could face those challenges together. She had become the bridge between them, the connection that had been missing for so long. Every day they were discovering new ways in which Bella helped heal the spaces that had once felt broken. As the days turned into weeks, the house seemed to glow with a new light. Tommy was more engaged, more active, and the laughter that had once been rare became a daily sound in their home. Bella had become the anchor, steady and strong, guiding them through the ups and downs of life with the simple gift of her presence. And for the first time in a long while, James felt a quiet optimism stirring in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to get better. As the weeks passed, Bella's role in the family grew more profound than anyone had expected. She was no longer just a dog. She was a silent teacher, a wise and comforting presence. James and Tommy had come to rely on her in ways they hadn't fully realized at first. What was once a simple act of adopting a pet had blossomed into a life-changing experience for both of them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, James watched Tommy and Bella together again. They were sitting in the corner, a quiet corner of the house where Tommy often retreated when he needed to process the world around him. Bella was lying at his feet, her head resting on his lap, her eyes half closed in contentment. Tommy, for his part, seemed lost in thought, tracing the lines of the dog's fur with his fingers. James had always known that his son had a rich inner world, but it was in moments like these, moments of quiet connection, that he saw just how deep Tommy's thoughts ran. The dog, with her steady presence, gave him the space he needed to reflect and process. And in turn, Tommy had started to share his thoughts in ways that surprised James. "Dad," Tommy said suddenly, his voice soft but steady, "I think Bella knows when I'm not okay." James blinked, unsure if he had heard him correctly. It wasn't the first time Tommy had made a comment like this, but it always left James with a sense of awe. Tommy wasn't just talking about the dog's ability to comfort him physically. He was acknowledging a deeper, almost spiritual connection. "She just knows," Tommy continued, his fingers now pausing as he looked down at Bella. "Like when I'm sad, she just sits with me. And when I'm happy, she runs around and plays. She never makes me feel like I'm too much or too little. She just is." James's heart swelled as he heard his son speak with such clarity. He had always wished Tommy could understand and articulate his feelings more easily. But hearing this, James realized that maybe the dog didn't need words to help Tommy make sense of his emotions. Bella, in her own quiet way, had given Tommy the gift of self-acceptance. James walked over and sat down beside them, not wanting to disturb the moment, but feeling the need to acknowledge it. "She's a pretty special dog, huh?" he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Tommy nodded, but his gaze never left Bella. "I think she knows me better than anyone." James chuckled, the sound rich with affection. "I think you might be right." As the evening drew on, James couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. It felt like just yesterday when Tommy's struggles had seemed insurmountable, when James had feared he might never understand his son's world. But Bella had brought them closer to each other and to a deeper understanding of Tommy's needs. And as much as James had hoped that a dog could help Tommy, he hadn't fully expected the shift it would bring in himself. Over time, James found himself slowing down. His work, his responsibilities, all the pressures he had carried for so long, seemed less overwhelming. Perhaps it was because of Bella, perhaps it was because of the way she had taught him to be present, to embrace the simple moments. Whatever it was, James no longer felt as burdened by the weight of the world. There was something about the way Tommy had begun to blossom with Bella by his side that made everything seem a little lighter. One particularly transformative afternoon, as the family prepared for a walk in the park, Tommy surprised James with a question. "Dad, can we bring Bella with us every time we go out?" James paused, considering the question. He had always been hesitant about taking Bella out in public. She was still learning to navigate crowds in unfamiliar places, and he wasn't sure how she would react. But the sincerity in Tommy's voice told him that this wasn't just a casual request. It was something that mattered deeply to his son. "Of course we can," James said, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Let's take Bella everywhere, if that's what you want." That simple promise seemed to light a spark in Tommy. His face broke into a grin, and he quickly fetched Bella's leash, ready for the adventure. As they walked to the park that day, Bella trotting happily beside them, James couldn't help but marvel at the difference in his son. The boy who had once felt so alone in a world that didn't seem to understand him was now walking confidently beside his father, with his loyal dog by his side. At the park, Bella immediately ran ahead, her tail wagging furiously as she explored every corner, as though she were a puppy again. Tommy, for his part, watched her with a kind of wonder. As he observed the dog, he seemed to mirror her energy, his excitement building with each new discovery she made. It was a simple thing, really, a day at the park, but for Tommy it felt like the world was opening up in new ways. He was no longer a boy on the outside of things, struggling to fit in. With Bella by his side, he was part of the world in a way that was both grounding and freeing. As the day wore on and the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, James couldn't help but feel a profound sense of peace. He looked at his son, now laughing as Bella tried to catch a frisbee, and he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Hope for the future, hope for the challenges that still lay ahead, but also hope for the simple joys in life, the ones they would discover together with Bella by their side. There was a quiet certainty in James's heart now. No matter what came next, they were going to be okay. Bella had shown them both how to live in the moment, how to embrace the good with the bad, and how to trust in each other. The walk home was a peaceful one, with Tommy's laughter still echoing in the cool evening air. Bella walked at his side, occasionally glancing up at him as though checking in on his well-being. They were a family now, no longer just two people trying to figure out how to make life work. They had learned that they could do it together, with Bella's unwavering presence as their guide. And as they reached their front door, Tommy looked up at his father with a smile that seemed to light up the world. "Dad," he said, his voice full of gratitude, "thank you for bringing her into our lives." James's heart swelled once more, and he nodded. It was the best decision we ever made. As they stepped inside, Bella trotted in happily behind them, her tail wagging in time with their steps. James knew that from now on, their world would never be quite the same. Bella had brought them back to life in ways he couldn't have imagined, and in her quiet way, she had taught them the most valuable lesson of all. that love, in all its forms, was the greatest force for healing they would ever know. As the months passed, the bond between Bella, Tommy, and James only grew stronger. The house was no longer just a place where they lived. It had become a sanctuary, a place of understanding and acceptance. The once quiet house now echoed with laughter, the sound of a family growing closer, bound together by their love for Bella. Bella had become a part of their daily rhythm, and every day brought a new discovery. It wasn't just the way she had helped Tommy with his emotional struggles. It was the way she had gently nudged both James and Tommy to see the world through a different lens. Tommy had come to understand that it was okay to feel vulnerable, that he didn't have to hide his feelings. And James, who had always been the protector, had learned to trust the process of healing, to trust that things would get better, even if the path wasn't always clear. But the most incredible change wasn't something they could measure with words. It was the subtle shift in how they saw each other. James had always tried to be the strong, dependable father, but he now realized that true strength came in vulnerability, in being open to the love and support of those around him. He wasn't alone in his journey, and he didn't have to carry everything on his own. Bella had shown him that too. In her silent way, she had taught him to be present in the moment, to slow down and embrace the quiet beauty of life. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves turned golden and the air was filled with the scent of fresh earth, James sat on the porch, watching Tommy and Bella play in the yard. It was a peaceful morning, the kind that made everything feel right in the world. Bella was chasing after a fallen leaf, her tail wagging furiously, while Tommy giggled uncontrollably at her antics. James leaned back in his chair, a content smile spreading across his face. He had always believed that the moments of life's greatest joys were found in the simplest of things: the sound of his son's laughter, the warmth of a home filled with love, and the quiet companionship of a dog who had transformed their lives. As he watched Tommy toss the leaf for Bella to chase once more, James realized something profound. They had come so far, together as a family, and it had been Bella who had helped them understand the beauty of unconditional love. The way she had brought them closer, taught them to embrace each other's imperfections, and made them realize that healing often happens in the most unexpected ways. It was all a testament to the power of love, patience, and understanding. "Dad, look!" Tommy called, his voice full of excitement. James turned his head just in time to see Bella leap into the air, catching the leaf in mid-flight. She landed gracefully on the grass, the leaf proudly held in her mouth. Tommy jumped up and down, his face lit with joy. "She did it! Bella's amazing!" James chuckled, feeling a warmth settle deep within him. He could see it now, the growth, the transformation. Tommy was no longer the withdrawn boy he once was. He was confident, happy, and full of life. Bella had been the key, the silent force that had unlocked a world of possibilities for them all. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner, James looked around the table at the faces of those he loved most. Tommy was talking animatedly about his day at school, Bella lying at his feet, listening attentively to every word. It was a simple dinner, but in that moment, it felt like the most important meal of their lives. It was a meal shared by a family that had found healing, connection, and love in the most unexpected of places. James raised his glass, his eyes meeting Tommy's. "To family," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "and to Bella for showing us what it means to love and be loved." Tommy smiled brightly, lifting his glass as well. "To Bella," he echoed, his voice full of gratitude, "the best dog in the world." Bella, as if on cue, looked up at them, her tail wagging in approval. She was more than just a pet. She was a teacher, a healer, and a friend. She had given them the greatest gift of all, the ability to love without hesitation, to open their hearts to the world around them, and to find strength in each other. As the evening wore on and the laughter of the family filled the room, James realized that their story had come full circle. The struggles they had faced, the challenges they had overcome, they were all a part of the beautiful tapestry of their lives. And in the center of it all was Bella. She had been their anchor, their guide, and their companion through it all. The world outside may have been uncertain, but inside their home, with Bella at their side, everything felt right. And James knew without a doubt that no matter what the future held, they were ready for it, together. As the night grew darker and the stars twinkled above, the family settled into a peaceful silence, knowing that the journey they had begun with Bella was far from over. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that they would face together, with love, courage, and the unwavering bond that had been forged between them all. And in the soft glow of the evening, Bella curled up by their feet, her breathing steady and calm, as if she too knew that this was exactly where they were meant to be. The story of their lives had been changed forever, all because they had opened their hearts to a little dog who had taught them everything they needed to know about love. Hope you enjoy the story. Don't forget to show some love, like and subscribe Storyboat for daily upcoming heartwarming stories.